It's Black Joy Magic with the family. My Black Joy gets me all the time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We want to make sure that we get started right on time. We have a great lineup, and we want to make sure that no one gets cut off and everyone has the time to share what they want to say. So let's get started. Thank you all for joining here for our call to action. This is a discussion. So we will be, feel free to please interact in the chat section. This is meant as much to engage with y'all. We'll do our best to try to collect some questions and keep it going. This is meant to be obviously more than just a webinar. This is supposed to be very exciting and engaging. So my name is Marlene Mendoza. I'm a consultant with CLASP, and CLASP is a national advocacy organization whose main mission is to recommend policy solutions that uplift people out of poverty. And we obviously here are focused with our youth policy work. And as you can see, thank you and shout out to all our partners and co-sponsors, sponsors and partners who has joined us together for this discussion. I'm gonna name all of them. Young Invincibles, if you're here, make sure to let us know that you're here in the comment section. We have the greatest, the one and only Opportunity Youth United. We also have Rock the Vote. Yes, Rock the Vote, make sure, we got a vote in November. We have Spark Action as well. We have NAACP Youth and College. We have the National Youth Employment Coalition, NYEC. We have Global Business Coalition for Education. We also have Think of Us, and we have the Reconnecting Youth Campaign, Frontline Solutions, and Young Invincibles. Yep, that's 11 of us. So thank you, our co-partners, for making this possible. We are super excited to be in partnership with all of y'all. So before we get started, let's go over some housekeeping rules, all right? And I know we already kind of started in the chat section, but please, please, please keep yourself on mute, all right? We don't want to have to use the powers that be and have to take you out of this discussion. So please keep your fingers, know what you're touching, and please, please keep yourself on mute. Use the chat function to ask questions and stay engaged. And use speaker view to see the speakers, obviously. We do have a couple of polls and engagement throughout this section, so make sure that you go to that link. I'm not going to read the whole thing, or you can text Keisha Bird 479 to 22333 to participate in the polls, and we'll make sure to put that in the chat section as well in case you miss it after this slide. The discussion will be recorded, and the recorded slides will be shared. Also, for the folks who are joining us on Facebook, we will not forget about y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in on Facebook. So we'll make sure to pull some of the sections from that end and make sure we incorporate it on here. So those are the housekeeping rules, very simple. Let's make sure we follow them, right? So now let's talk about what brings us all here, right? What is the goals of this discussion? Because it is a discussion, we cannot do any of this work without the support and need from all of us here joining us for this call, all right? So the goals of this discussion is really, most importantly, is to center youth and young adults and engage them in the national conversation so that they can share their experiences about what's happening with them during this pandemic. There's a lot of conversation to be had about the youth issues and what they're going through, but this is meant to center youth and young adults. This is about hearing directly from them, not through a middleman or someone else, or, it's about hearing directly from them what their experience is like. So we are CLASP and all of our partners, we tend to be great conveners for this, and we thought we'd give this platform to our young adult partners. Also, we want to hear from the leaders, the young adult leaders in the field, who were once, youth leaders in their community. Now they're in a position of power and they're young adult leaders in their field. And they want to give us updates on what they're doing in response to this pandemic as well, and what issues they're working on, specifically for 16 to 25-year-olds, but not just them. Also, we want to give some key points regarding the stimulus relief packages around COVID-19. We obviously don't have time to go really in depth for them, but we want to provide some of those key points because we should be knowledgeable about what's happening with these funding bills. They tend to be very confusing. And lastly, it's about building momentum. Yes, times are tough, things are hard, a lot of people are down, but we want to make this discussion to uplift everyone, keep morality and all that good stuff. So let's go and see what is the next thing. So we're going to do a roll call. Oh, make sure you mute yourself. We're going to do a roll call. And so before we get officially started, we just want to know who's joining us. So please let us know what's your name, what community you're from, or what's the city or state. So feel free to go to poll. You see that, you can see it right now. pollev.com/KeishaBird479 to do the poll and show us where are you calling in from? Where are you joining us from? Ooh, I see a lot of things here. Some Cali people, I see Missouri, Joplin. I see, let's give us a couple of minutes here for y'all to participate and show us where you guys are coming in. Ooh, DC's in the house. I see some, ooh, East Coast, heavy. All right, let's see, West Coast. Let's see if we can get anyone on maybe some of Pacific Islands or Alaska. You never know. Anyone can, oh yeah. Let's see, I see, shout out to Kalamazoo, I see y'all. Boston area in New York City, Connecticut, Mississippi, yes. Where's the South? Phoenix. Oh man, I really want to go to Sedona. All right, oh, LA. Brooklyn. Oh, we have someone from Iowa. I'm actually calling in from Iowa City, so that's great. Minneapolis. We have more DC. Chicago, woo! Shout out to Chicago, folks. Born and raised. West Side, Belmont Cragen, in case anyone here is from that side. Baltimore, Maryland. I see y'all. Lansing, Michigan. Ooh. We have a great, oh man. This is great. Ooh, someone asked, is there any international options? We did not think that far ahead, but thank you for letting us know you're calling from so far. Ooh, let's see. Atlanta, Georgia's in the house. Wisconsin. This is great. We have a good representation from everyone. Florida. Ooh, East Coast though is definitely winning here. Portland, Oregon. New Orleans, sorry. Let's see. We have some Maine folks. All righty. Okay, thank y'all. So now maybe if I can see, if y'all can see me as a speaker, so I can give you a little bit of framing for this conversation. We kind of went over our goals here. Yeah, okay. So just want to give us a little bit more of some framing before we go ahead and kick it off with a young adult who's going to really honor us and ground us here with a virtual blessing. So Isabella, just to let you know, you'll be on standby here in a couple minutes. But I just wanted to share some quick stats with y'all to help really frame this conversation, right? It's about youth and young adults and COVID. But this is recent data. This is actually from yesterday. So 7.7 million American young workers under 30 are now unemployed, all right? 7.7 million. 3 million have dropped out of the workforce in the last month. That is nearly 1 in 3. right? 40% of these workers tend to rely or are part of the retail and food service industry, right? And young people, especially young people of color, tend to be the first ones to be let go and the last ones to get rehired, right? So I'm saying all of these statistics because one, it's important to understand the gravity of the situation and why this is such an important topic to talk about, you know. We hear a lot of things about young people and the things that they're not doing in compliance with certain public health measures, but the reality is that we have to look at the situation of young people before the pandemic. And if we look at that, if we go back and look in 2008 when we had the first economic crisis, young people had the highest, peaked at an opportunity youth rates, right? Because they were being unemployed or underemployed. So we understand that that happened. And although that's been over 12 years, markets might have had bounced back, right? But again, markets do not reflect what is happening to the common person and the wealth that they have or the money that they're doing or how they're doing economically. And so young people were barely trying to lift themselves up from the last 2008 recession with their families, and then we get hit with another one, you know, in our short lifespan. So what does that say about our future quality of life, right? What does that say about what are we doing to secure and ensure that we have a better economic standing for ourselves and our future generations? So there's a lot to discuss later on today about this, and we're going to talk about the things that we can do, right? But just wanted to set up that little bit of framing. And I would also like to introduce y'all to the person, a young Native woman. Her name is Isabella Madrigal. She is passionate about medicine, writing, and storytelling. And she is a co-founder of the Native Storytelling Project, which seeks to reclaim the narrative around surrounding the Indigenous experience. She received the National Girl Scouts Gold Award for her play, Menil and Her Heart. And the cast of the play consisted mainly of community members, giving voice to the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This is definitely not the last time you will see her. She is a rock star. She was invited to speak at the United Nations Girls Speak Out event to address violence against women. And Isabella is a 2020 Champion for Change through the Center for Native American Youth. Shout out to CNA if y'all are joining us, another great partner. And Menil Her Heart is the winner of the Yale Young Native Storytelling Contest, right? So if that isn't enough to hype y'all up for this, I just want to give this next stage to Isabella to give us this blessing to start us off for this very important discussion.
Mihoe, Nananteo Isabella Madrigal, Ma Naneka Kawianga Nasun Achama Amnaa, Nasun Achama Temal Nea Balawa.
Isabella, I think you might be muted.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear her.
Okay, wonderful. All right. I'll go ahead and just start.
Okay, so hopefully someone from our Zoom
We can hear.
Unmute her.
Marlon, we can hear her.
We can hear her, Marlon. We can hear her.
Yeah, we hear her. I hear her.
Let's see here.
Check your system.
I think the problem is that they're both signed in under the same account.
That's correct.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sorry, everyone's telling me that they can hear her, so it might just be me. So, all right, sorry about that, Isabella, keep going.
And then Madrigal, Machneneka Kawianga, Nasun Achama Temal Nea Balawa, Achakwa Echma Umuntemal Nasun Achama Amnaa, Isabella Indigenica Wabizesha Indoram, Mikanak Waju Indonjaba, Wahine Indigo. So hello and good afternoon to everyone who is calling in today. I hope that people can hear me. My name is Isabella Madrigal. I'm a 17-year-old high school senior. I'm actually calling in from Temecula, California, which is not too far from San Diego. It's wonderful to be here virtually with all of you for this discussion, and I think it's a discussion that is so important right now. The blessing that I just gave myself and kind of introduced who I am, my clan as both Kauai and Turtle Mountain Chippewa, but also the intention that I have here today, and I think the intention that all of us have in this discussion by saying, you know, my heart is good, my heart is open and full of light and love, by thanking the greatness of being, the creator, Amna'a, and our beautiful mother, the earth, and just asking all of us who are here today to kind of have a good heart for one another, to be kind, and to listen to each other wherever we are this evening. So during this time of global pandemic, I think I'll just start by saying I think we're starting to see a lot of the inequities in this nation being magnified, and those who are too often forgotten, silenced. And I think the price of that is really devastating, because I think that many of us have been touched in some way by COVID-19 and experienced a loss from it. I think the Native community has particularly been devastated, and I know, you know, I'm seeing it a lot in my own community. So something this has brought up for me is that as Indigenous people, our stories and our voices are missing from the national narrative, and when that representation goes unacknowledged, then we get forgotten when it really counts. And so we must be visible, and more importantly, we must be together. And it needs to be, you know, an intergenerational kind of together. Elders, young people, mothers, fathers, children from all backgrounds, because, you know, I think we can all learn from each other. This is, right, a global pandemic, and it's not isolated to one nation or one people. But I've also seen, I think, people coming together in ways that would have seemed impossible before this happened. People sharing what little they have, sewing masks for people that they've never met. But it's the small things that I think can make all the difference. Something that has always been very important to me is this idea of Native storytelling. There is a lot we can learn, I think, from these ancient stories. They carry a timeless wisdom that tell us how to be and guide us in how we live today, and especially during this time. You know, we have stories of an illness similar to this one, and in this story we were told to stay apart so that we could stay together. The Native people of this country have dealt with extreme illness and sickness brought by settler colonialism, and we still bear this sickness and its symptoms today, but we also carry genes of resiliency and practices to handle this. And so I think that sometimes people forget that in order to be able to go forward, sometimes we have to first go back and remember, in order to heal. And for me as a Native person, stories and culture are a great way to heal, and I think a form of medicine in their own right. So I just want to end by saying that something like this kind of virtual town hall is so important, because it brings together people to share their stories, their experiences, and spark discussions for solution and aid. And so I'm so very excited to hear the rest of these incredible speakers, because, you know, we need those concrete answers, and it's important to hold people accountable. I want to end by, you know, thanking this organization and these individuals for allowing me to give this blessing. Achama, thank you, and I'll turn it back over.
Oh, Jesus. So now I was on mute. Okay, we're good. Thank you, Isabella, so much for those beautiful words, and for giving us your perspective. So now to transition the conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about the overview of a lot of the issues that our young adult leaders are leading on. And so to begin, I want to talk a little bit about very kind of key points around the stimulus packages around COVID-19. And how the young adults kind of fare in that. I feel often we tend to talk a lot about, you know, the fact that we have expanded unemployment insurance with the pandemic unemployment coverage, or PUC, and the stimulus checks, right? And we tend to focus on the things that we did get, but what are we missing, right? What is missing from a lot of these relief packages that did not actually support young adults and young workers, right? So to name a few of the things that I'm going to say that are missing or need additional support, this is to really give a perspective of the things that we have to continue to fight for, right? And oftentimes these things seem like very simple things that you would think that our members of Congress, who we should hold accountable, should be able to put aside any kind of interest to be able to say we need to support our youth workforce. but however, that currently isn't the whole case. As we can see, based off of what we have seen with, I think it's 4 or 5 different relief packages, nothing robust has been, there's nothing robust enough to support young workers and youth workers either in regards to summer youth employment programs. There isn't youth-specific economic relief, dedicated funding to aid the loss of summer youth employment jobs, like I mentioned, or hazard pay for frontline workers and worker protections for gig workers that are needed, right? We do know that under the CARES Act, there was some extension for gig workers, self-employed workers, contract workers to get kind of the unemployment insurance that they did receive. So that was a good thing. But again, there's a lot of things that mixed status families cannot take advantage of this. Specifically also a lot of young people who, for example, are in school, right? If you're an individual, you can be claimed as an independent on someone else's federal income tax return if they're under the age of 19 or if they're a student and under 24. So we saw a lot of young college students not being able to receive some of these stimulus checks, right? And aside from them, there's a lot of, I wanna say, things that are getting in the ways to make sure that young people actually get access to a lot of the things that they have passed, right? So for example, how are we ensuring that young people are getting access to paid medical family leave, right? How are we ensuring that some of these young people are receiving some of these checks? There's a lot of things that are standing in the way for some of our young people to make sure that they get some of these stimulus checks. And there's a lot of misinformation or confusion around, you know, if I am a young person and I'm not a dependent, or if I'm a young person and have never done taxes before, can I still get this kind of stimulus check, right? Again, we don't have time today right now to go over all of these nuances and the specifics. However, we do have a landing page after this event with a list of COVID-19 resources from our co-partners as well that have laid out a lot of the more nuanced and detailed things regarding what young people can access. But the bottom line here is that there wasn't enough to support for childcare for not only youth and young workers, but you know, for family at the family level. The HEROES Act did fix a little bit around immigrant exclusion and expanded, like again I said, a paid medical family leave, but we just need more information on how to get these payments into the hands of youth and young adults and working students. So to really go into a more of an in-depth discussion about what is really, how our young adult leaders are leading in the situation, I'm gonna turn it over to Jamira to tell us a little bit more about her panel that she has right now lined up to talk a little bit more about what is important things to discuss right now. So Jamira, I'll leave it to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marlon. And shout out, first of all, I would like to shout out every single person who has tuned in today. We are currently at 356 people on the chat, and it's just phenomenal because oftentimes when you think about moments like this, adults and those in power will say young people don't care, but it's 5:53 on is it Tuesday? On a Tuesday, you're losing track of time, and you all have shown that you not only care, but you're ready to, one, find solutions for change, and also how do you collaborate with each other across the state. And depending on where you are, you're probably going into your 9th or 10th week of quarantine. And so we appreciate you participating in today's Zoom. Before we kick off the panel, first let me introduce myself. My name is Jamira Burley. I am the Head of Youth Engagement and Skills at the Global Business Coalition for Education. I'm also a social impact consultant, and I have the pleasure and honor of being on the class board. But before we get into our panel, and I have the opportunity and honor of introducing our amazing panel of youth leaders, I want to first ask you all, what issue is the most you're most interested in hearing about today? Because I think that will help to frame not only some of the things that our speakers will talk about, but more importantly, when you submit your questions a little bit later, it also will help us to frame how we broaden and deepen our focus in the conversation. So I'll give you a few moments to answer that question, and we'll see your results. So it looks like the highest as of now is workforce development, my job. So I like that one so far. At 39%, And civic engagement and voter suppression is number 2. We all at 18%. We also had mental and behavioral health at 18%. Your information is still coming in. Continue to vote and submit that information on what issue are you most interested in hearing about today. And as you continue to fill out that form, I also want to remind folks that while we may select 1 or even 2 issues, it's important to recognize that many of these issues, there's so many intersectionalities of those issues and how they impact individual communities, but also individual people. As you all are on this session today, you all represent so many different communities and identities, and these issues may impact you very differently. So we'll continue to look at the data as it continues to come in, and I'll ask you all to reference it a little bit later. And while we're going throughout the next few moments, answering questions, getting answers from our panelists, I want you all to take an opportunity to submit your questions in the chat room or in the question box to Keisha, and she'll help to facilitate that question portion a little bit later. So with that being said, I want to jump right into it and introduce our amazing panel. We first up have Tiffany Lofton. Tiffany Lofton serves as the National Director for Youth and College Division for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. Her mission is to train, organize, and uplift Black youth leaders everywhere. She has the honor of overseeing more than 340 middle, high school, and college chapters around the country. I'm super excited to have her on here because she's been at the forefront of youth organizing for the last, I'm not going to age her, but at least a decade. So thank you, Tiffany, for joining us. Next up, we have Sixto Cancer. He is the founder and CEO of Think of Us, a system change nonprofit to modernize the foster care system to bring young people to the center and using technology to improve the implementation of the child welfare policies. You might have seen him. He's a 30 under 30 for Forbes. He's a White House champion of change. He's a millennial maker for BET, on and on and on. We're super excited to have him because his work has been phenomenal. And last but certainly not least, we have LaShawn Amato. LaShawn is the project director for Opportunity Youth United, a national grassroots movement for opportunity youth and their adult allies seeking to alleviate poverty in the communities through civic engagement. I want to first thank you all for joining us, and jumping right into the question portion, I want to ask each of you, because I think in moments like this, we forget that those who are doing the work are also human, right? And are also impacted systematically by the issues across the board. And so I want to first start, and we can start with LaShawn. As an activist or a movement builder in this space, how have you been coping in times of quarantine or COVID-19?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So I've been trying my best to take care of myself. There's no good to others if not whole and complete. So far, first I've been like cooking a lot. It makes you feel really good. I've been learning some new things and, making sure my belly is healthy. Second, most importantly, is staying in touch with family and friends and making sure everyone's okay. I did have a few family members who ended up contracting the virus and doing better now, but it's very important to stay in touch with family. And then I'll say the third thing that I've been really conscious about is like creating that work-life balance, because I've been home and working from home. It's been hard to kind of turn off that switch. But going back to my first point, just making sure that, I prioritize my self-care, mind, body, and spirit, and not be so bogged down in the work, because there's so much urgency out there and a lot of support that's needed, but trying to make sure that, again, that I'm taking care of myself. So those are like the top 3 things that I've been doing personally to sort of weather this storm.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that answer. And to be honest, I hear a lot of people have been starting cooking. Some have had more success than others, myself included. So maybe after this, we might have to start a youth cooking book, sharing some recipes of how we survived COVID-19. Tiffany or Sixto, how have you been coping?
I'll pass it on to Tiffany and then I can go.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everybody. So glad to be here and thank you for the warm invitation. I think I'm on day 66 right now, actually, of quarantine. And I can say that it has not been easy working at a national organization where I have a team of 6 people and also youth members across the country who were immediately displaced and also having to relocate. So the first thing that I had to do in this moment was to make sure that I take care of my spiritual, physical, and emotional health so that I can take care of other people. I've had a lot of time now to slow down. My job requires me to travel a lot and be a lot of places. For example, for the month of February, I think I might have been gone only one day. Excuse me, I might have been home only one day and I was gone the entire month. So I'm not gonna say it worked out great, but it did work out because I've been able to recover and get a lot of rest and slow all the way down. But what I will say is working during a pandemic is not the same as working from home. And so what is hard is I would have imagined that because we're all at this place where we have to stay at home, we would not see the violence on Black communities that we thought we'd be seeing right now in this moment because we're all supposed to be in the house. But apparently white supremacy doesn't wait or stop for anyone. And so the work that the NAACP does is to support our youth on the ground and help them transition from doing all of this work in person to doing it all virtually, and still finding that our goals have not changed, but our strategies and the mechanics of how we do it does need to change. In addition to what folks have said, I mean, that's what brings me the coping in this moment, is making sure that I build community with the folks that I'm always in contact with, that I'm uplifting my young leaders across the country. Sure, I do the cooking. I'm also a runner. And so I've been running 6 miles every Saturday in the morning. I do a lot of Disney Plus binge watching. Don't tell nobody that. And I like the previous speaker, I make sure that I set boundaries and routines for the day so that I'm not always working 24/7.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. And only 353 people know you have a Disney Plus account. So I will be asking for your.
I don't care. Judge me. No problem.
Sixto?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. You know, when I first went to go answer this question, what came to mind was like, oh, I'm just keeping myself busy. And then I had to really like sit here and say, but really, how have you been coping? And for me, like I have anxiety, so I get very super, and one way anxiety can come out is you get over prepared. And I think that's one of the ways that, you know, I have definitely started to cope with this. You know, when the pandemic hit, when we started to do shelter in place, I was on my way to the airport to go home. And my gut was just telling me as I was in LA, like, do not get on that plane, you know? And I'm literally driving and I'm like, well, I have to land in DC and then I'll go home. It's just one more trip, right? Just one more trip. And as I'm getting to the airport, I see this article pop up that 8 TSA agents tested positive for COVID. And at that point I said, no, I can't go home. And home for me is New York, right? And so for the last 80 days, I've been in LA. And finally today I'm going to start driving back, but it's been being over prepared, setting up all these systems. We went from going to get on the airplane to going to a hotel to leading the response, doing national town halls from a hotel room, from Airbnbs, until now finally being able to take this drive back because I see kind of a little gap here. The other thing I would say is like, I've been learning how to set these new boundaries of like, it was a big moment for me personally to be like, you know what, the mission might require me to be in DC right now, where a lot of folks are making decisions about our young people's lives. But I can't do it. I cannot get out there and I won't go out there, and I'm just going to have to adjust. And adjusting meant like you get up at 3:30 and you stay on East Coast time and you kind of work the clock and do all of those things.
That's a really great point. I really appreciate you mentioning that to all the speakers so far, is like recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup. You also have to take care of yourself as you take care of the work. And again, I want to remind you all, we are going to try to get in some audience questions before the end of the panel. So feel free to drop us a line. I want to hop into the next question. Especially want to direct this to LaShawn and Tiffany. You know, you kind of mentioned it in your last response, Tiffany, regarding how Black people are continue to be experience police brutality, continue to be kind of experience violence by the system. And we know that in times like this, opportunity youth are also at risk. We saw a number of cities cancel summer programs coming up over the next few weeks because of budget cuts, or realistically because people are expecting folks to work from home. I'm curious for the two of you, how has COVID-19 in many ways intensified the human rights concerns for the young people at the margins, specifically the young people that you work with, and how has that shown up in your work? And we'll start with you, Tiffany.
Okay. Yeah, with 300 people on the phone, you got to give some names so people can know when to go. I'm like trying to flip through to see who's going to talk first. So let me say this. I don't think it's lost upon anybody that's probably listening to the sound of my voice that what we see during the health crisis, the health pandemic that we're currently in, is just a side effect and a reaction of what we know disparities currently existed already in the country when it came to poor people. And poor people is never synonymous with people of color. So when it's poor people, Black folks, immigrants, young people, elderly folks, what we've seen in this moment is just the magnification of all of those things. Now, I will say what has been interesting is when the first wave of this happened, a lot of people on social media and a lot of news outlets were covering how this was an issue for white folks. And then I know my community was joking around and laughing, saying this wasn't really going to be for us, that we were immune to it, we could drink some ginger ale and would be okay. But what we know now is that out of the 83,000 plus people who have literally lost their lives to this this virus, is that most of those folks have looked like people like me. And what the health crisis part of it is this: it's not just we are most at risk because we don't have access to the healthcare that we need, because doctors don't believe Black women when they come to the hospital and say something is wrong with them, because our young folks don't have access to good quality healthcare around them in the area. That's not just the issue. The issue is also in this moment for me as a national organizer to build Black political power is, do my people know what it takes or what it means to participate in the political process so that we can then gain what we need to protect our communities, to defend our communities, and save our communities. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, sure, we can talk about how we're most susceptible because we already have pre-existing health conditions that don't put us in a good position versus other races or other communities. But what's most important to me is, do the people who look like me and do young folks that I work with the NAACP understand that the census is so necessary to complete, because that's what gives Congress the decision-making power to send ventilators into the community. If you don't get counted, you don't get a ventilator. If you don't get counted, they won't know how much to pass for the next stimulus check that everybody's going to get in the community. If you don't get counted, then the 60 million people who have filed for unemployment, we can't give them the money that they need because we don't know how many people are in the community. And they don't just count the unemployment numbers, they count how much money do I need to send to that particular state. That's why the census is important. But unless we make those civic engagement connections, I'm so glad that civic engagement in the beginning was number 2 of the issues, because that really is at the root of how we build political power and get what we want for our communities. When we talk about census and civic engagement and elections, unless we're able to make those educated connections to how that impacts our health as a community, then the human rights issue will continue to be Black folks versus everybody else, and poor people versus everybody else, and young people versus everybody else. And that's not actually what the problem is. But the problem is that we don't have the right people in office. And I can say this because I work for the NAACP, and especially in the White House, who aren't smart enough to make the decisions that our communities need. And so I am very clear, and have always been clear, that it's our job to make those decisions, and they're coming up in November. So make sure you vote.
Well, I appreciate you saying smart enough. That's a really nice way of describing the lack of knowledge for folks who are representative of our community. And to your point, now oftentimes folks think that, I don't like this candidate, a candidate doesn't like me, I don't really do politics, but really politics does you. right? Every single decision in your community, from the street lights to access to books in your school, is all done, decided on through the political process. Someone was elected and or appointed by a politician to enable for that to happen. So LaShawn, I want to turn it over to you, because I mean, when we think about opportunity youth, we know jobs are at risk. Millions of young people are out of school. Millions of young people might be impacted if they go outside in the summertime during social distancing standards. What does that look like for your community and the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and thanks for the previous speaker. Because the health and the scale of the health concerns for our communities is real. I remember at one point there was a rumor that like Black folks couldn't get COVID-19, and now we're like dying by the numbers, and it's disproportionately impacting our communities. I think many of us probably even know people who have the virus, or some of us even know people who have passed away. And that is like really something hard to deal with. And it makes me think of one of our organizers who mentioned that grieving in quarantine is like the worst thing ever, right? So that health piece is very important. So thank you for bringing that up. But I think even outside of that, when you talk about poverty in the communities that our young people coming from, it sort of intensified poverty for a lot of young people and families, because they were already struggling to get access to food or bills, to pay their bills, or rental assistance, childcare, the list goes on. But that lack of resources in the communities now is really showing up. And it's definitely a concern, and a lot of our individuals and organizers have been doing a lot of outreach to share resources, to give out hygiene and food products and things of that nature to really meet the urgent needs of communities now. Technology is another big one. We talk about a human right. Like, I think access to technology is definitely one of them. We're seeing that young people are unable to engage in their education, whether in the high schools or whether in a community-based program. They don't have the technology to engage. They fall behind if they're not already behind. I know in New York, they have a campaign pushing, I guess, young people who are suspended from school before COVID-19 were not allowed to continue with the instruction moving forward. So because they were suspended before COVID-19, they're sort of left behind, right? When you look at suspension rates, you see the data and you disaggregate that, and you see who is suspended. So that's like a big one. On the employment side, similar to the personal issues, opportunity youth, some of you may know, 16 to 24-year-olds out of school and out of work. There are 4.9 million currently. And again, before this virus kicked into play, and they were already sort of locked out of the job market for various reasons, whether it's lack of credentials, whether it was foreign policies or discrimination. So that was already there, right? But now that this virus has kicked into play, they're at an even greater disadvantage. Because a lot of the jobs that young people are working in, especially those first-time jobs, are considered like high risk right now. So they're all being eliminated. And really, the only people who can really work are people who are able to work from home and have that technological capacity to be able to move forward. So when I think of
barrier.
Say that again.
Almost a wealth and an age barrier that's impacting them from being able to have those jobs.
Exactly. And also something that's been on my mind, thinking in the future, is the digital divide, right? When you talk about technology, not only is that dominant right now during these conditions, it's also the future of work, right? And again, there's a huge gap across the globe in local communities for who has those technology skills to be able to compete for those jobs now and when this is over, moving into the future. So that's a big one, just trying to figure out how to fill those gaps when it relates to tech skills, again, across the globe. And then the last one
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're right. Wi-Fi technology shouldn't be a luxury, needs to be a utility, to say the least. And I really appreciate those points. I want to quickly turn it over to Sixto before we have to go to audience questions. Sixto, you are representing foster youth. A lot of the work that you do is some of the most vulnerable young people in the country who oftentimes are aging out during a global pandemic. What policies and or recommendations are you working towards and or that you have to protect the rights of foster youth?
Yeah, Jameer, before I dive too deep into the recommendations, I want to paint the picture of the current state of young people. There are 876,000 young people who have experienced 1 day in foster care between 14 and 26. And according to some studies, about 10% of all Black children will experience foster care at one point. And so it is the hidden issue, the hidden invisible issue. And the outcomes for when young people age out, they don't get adopted, they don't go back home, are very drastic pre-COVID. We had about 20% of young people turning 18 and becoming homeless on their birthday, right? About 81% of our males experience an arrest before age 26. And that has a lot to do with poverty crimes, needing to eat, trespassing, right? We have a situation where only 6% of our young people were in community college, graduating from community college, 3%. We were able to do a couple of things during this. And one of them, which we felt was so important, was to create proximity between the decision makers and the actual people on the ground. Because when this pandemic started, what people started to mobilize in our field around were laptops. And this is very important, but it raised a question to me that is laptops the core need? And so we started to dig in more. And what we did was we said, you know what, let's actually engage the federal government. And this was a decision that we felt that we needed to put some of the politics aside to be able to say, look, there's about to be decision makers making choices that affect young people in foster care's life. And in foster care, your life is completely dictated by the actual policy of an agency. It is not like when you're home. You literally get a vaccine, you literally get to go outside based on what new guidance was issued. And so one of these things, some of the things that we ended up pushing was the fact that we wanted young people to stay in foster care and not age out during the pandemic. While the entire country is being told to stay at home, stay in shelter, we are being forced out of those young people who are aging out, who are 18 or 21 in certain states. They were being forced out. So there was a quick study that was done, a survey that went across country that a lot of us participated in pushing out. And it resulted that 52% of our young people reported a negative impact on their health. Of that, 56% reported literally being clinically depressed, right? Levels of clinical depression. 43% of our young people have an issue with stable housing, 13% of which have been forced out of their housing during the pandemic. So for us, it's been about asking states to extend foster care. It's been about literally partnering with people to see where could we have some type of agreement in, because right now, what we're seeing is that we have had young people commit suicide. We have had young people where we just don't know where they're at. Before the pandemic, we had 60,000 young people missing that have ran away over the last 15 years. And now we're still trying to figure out where not only that group of young people are at, but where are the rest of you. So I can go on and on and on, but what I want everyone to know
but what are your recommendations?
The thing that we're pushing and my recommendation and the thing that I really want to be my call to action to the folks on the phone is that foster care organizing needs help. And it's not an issue that you may be very intimate with, but we need organizers because we have had a lack of that infrastructure in our field. So to the extent that we can have allies show up and help organize on our end, we would greatly appreciate it so that we can push the funding legislations that are opportunities right now. We're asking for about $6,000 for foster youth to be able to be stably housed per young person, so it's not a lot of money. And we're asking for young people not to age out during the pandemic.
That's a really great point. It actually goes directly into one of our audience questions, and shout out to whoever proposed this question to Tiffany. Tiffany, in your career, what extent do you discuss with youth how to be co-conspirators to other marginalized communities, also seeking help to other communities?
That's a great question. And first, 6-0, holla at me after this. So I always believe that we can't guilt trip people into being a part of campaigns and movements that they're just not familiar with. And so my job in the NAACP, and really my work in the last 12 years, has been to make sure that we expose people to other folks' realities. That's one of the quickest and easiest ways to recruit people to some of these movements. One of the things, as an example, is this conversation not only around immigration, but also around queer and trans immigrant youth that the NAACP hasn't really always talked about, right? I come from California, born and raised in Los Angeles, and my first entry into this organizing work was fighting for the Federal Dream Act. And I was never undocumented, still am not undocumented, and I understood that the work that was happening on the statewide level in California to make colleges and stuff accessible for young people, especially immigrants, was necessary to do across the entire country. So shout out to United We Dream, wherever they might be. My job is to bring United We Dream to the NAACP. My job is to bring Black Lives Matter and Black Youth Vote to United We Dream. My job is to bring the work that, what's it called? Think of Us, to come to the NAACP and have the discussions with not only my youth membership, but with the adult membership too. Because when we are allowed to give people a taste of what it's like to step into other people's shoes, I always believe that my people get their heartstrings pulled and then want to participate or help and support the movement. That's how we build community. That's how we expose folks to intersectionalities. And folks don't always recognize that they have multiple intersectionalities until you show them someone who identifies with them, right? And so it's been hard because the NAACP is over 100 years old, but it's been very worth it.
That's a really great answer. Thank you, Tiffany. Another question from our audience, and I like this question a lot because I'm all for radical change. And I'm actually going to turn this over to LaShawn. Do you view the disruption of COVID-19 as an opportunity for radical change in any field, area, or industry? And if so, what is one particular radical change that you would promote? Right? These young people are ready.
Let me think about that. Yeah, I think I need a minute to think about that one.
Tiffany or Sixto, do you want to jump in?
You know, when I think about the radical change that's needed, it is fundamentally the change is not wrapped up in a policy, it's not wrapped up in a program, but it is fundamentally in the mental models that are driving the behavior. So if there was one thing that I felt that we need to be able to change, and it is probably gonna get me in trouble for saying this, but it is white supremacy. It is the idea that you are superior, period, and that there is someone who deserves to be there. It is, in my opinion, that when we saw this pandemic start, we heard the loud, clear message about this is the great equalizer. Then there was a weekend where all of the news outlets showed the data around what was happening to communities of color. Then we saw the next wave quickly on that Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, data about how it was essential workers that were being affected. And then was the first actual protest to say we should open up America again. And that right there told Black people, told people of color in this country that you are not worth it and that we can put you at risk and we can put you on the front line as long as it's you that are dying. And so for me, the one radical thing that needs to be able to move this country is the very idea that we are all human and deserve to be at the table. It is this idea of supremacy. It is this idea of white supremacy that is actually tearing our country apart.
Thank you for that, Sixto. And to everyone who submitted questions, I'm sorry that we can't get to all of them, but keep submitting them. We'll try to get you answers through the class network as we continue this conversation. This is not the end, but the beginning. I want to shout out to my panelists for joining the conversation. But before we close out, I'm always down about positivity, right? I think that we need to recognize the progress that we've made. What is one thing, quickly, in a tweetable moment, what is one thing that in moments like this still continues to give you hope? And we'll start with you, Tiffany.
Damn it, you should have gone with me last.
Your shirt gives you away, it's so bright.
Oh, well, what gives me hope?
Yeah.
What encourages me and gives me hope is watching the quick capacity of my people to adapt to resiliency and care for our communities and love. I know what we see on social media isn't always the positive stuff, but there's a lot of positive stuff happening. And if you can be a part of the network and find it, it'll encourage you every day.
Thank you. LaShawn?
Yeah, I think it's the unity and the love out there. I think our communities are taking on the burden and filling in the gaps where they exist. So it's been amazing to see all of that. And I look forward to seeing it continue to grow.
Thank you for that. Sixto?
You know, for me, it's the bravery of every single government worker, every frontline worker that has been working with our young people in care and who have taken risks that is going to get them fired. They approved something that they weren't supposed to approve. They did not exit a young person out of foster care because they believed that it was the right thing to keep them in. And it is that type of bravery from the federal to the state to the local level that is actually keeping our young people somewhat safe. And that right there is what keeps me moving.
Awesome. And what keeps me motivated is the fact that in every single movement in history, young people has been at the forefront of change. So there's no age requirement to change the world. And in that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Marlon, who's going to move us to our next section of the program.
Thank you so much, Shamira. That was lovely. I'm going to just give you snaps right here and claps. And for those of you on the chat, please do so. That was very uplifting. I see a lot of words that says hope. So thank you so much to all of the panelists and Jamira for facilitating that and giving us an idea of what the young adult leaders are doing right now in regards to helping out their population regarding opportunity youth, young people across the board, foster youth. This is very important. And like Keisha put in the chat, young people do not live single issue lives, right? And this is why you're gonna hear about an array of different perspectives that young people are experiencing during this pandemic, right? So I wanna talk a little bit about the shift in consciousness that we are experiencing right now, right? Obviously, you can feel the energy from all the young people on the chat and on this discussion, talking about things about, you know, we should strive for better. We want more. We are demanding more. And I feel like there's a difference between what folks on the top are telling us what is capable and what we are ready for versus what young people themselves are saying that they want and are ready for, right? And in order to kind of bridge that gap, we need to look at that data, right? We know that data can be used and weaponized in different ways, but that is not the situation here. We are bringing you here, and I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Cathy Cohen and her partnership lead, Jonathan Likes, who's also a co-founder of Black Youth Project 100, who will be shortly giving us a presentation on the data on how COVID-19 has impacted, in particular, youth of color, right? So the Gen Forward survey, just to give you a little bit of background of it, is led by, again, Dr. Cathy Cohen out of the University of Chicago. Shout out to Chicago again, to my fellow Chi folks. And it's the first of its kind to pay specific attention to the way that race and ethnicity impact young adults' views and experiences in the world, right? Gen Forward believes researchers make a mistake when they have an assumption that one size fits all, right? And we've been saying that there's more nuance to that, right? Young people don't just lead single issue lives. And so their data pretty much is out to do that, to show you the different perspectives that young people have on a lot of these different issue areas, right? So I am super excited. This is hot off the press, and we are grateful that they're here with us to join us in this conversation and give us that perspective of the data that they have been collecting. So without further ado, let's hit it over to Dr. Cathy Cohen and Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Marlene. We appreciate you so much. I'm just going to give Dr. Cohen a moment to share her screen. So today we're going to discuss data in regards to COVID policies, but we're also going to have a broader conversation about youth support for this youth radical agenda that we were discussing a bit in our last conversation. And we appreciate all of those panelists. But Dr. Cohen and I are really excited to be able to be here with you all today and share some of the most recent data coming out of our Gen Forward survey. So first, I would like to ask you all, what do you think is the most important problem facing this country today? Is it maybe coronavirus, racism, lack of healthcare, all of the above? Please try to post that answer in the chat box right now. Someone said greed. Come on, greed. Housing. So what do you think is the most important problem facing the country today? White supremacy. I see a couple, all of the aboves. So we're actually in a time where we know some people believe in alternative facts, we're actually going to focus on some hard data that's coming out of the field. So first, what are the narratives that we see out there? One, we understand that there's a disproportionate impact of the COVID pandemic on communities of color. So a lot of folks have heard the statistic from Louisiana saying that 32% of people who live in Louisiana are Black, but 70% of the deaths in Louisiana are Black. So we already know that there's a disproportionate rate of people dying in our communities. Next slide.
I'm trying.
So another disproportionate impact of the COVID pandemic is not only impacting life and death, but it's also impacting who's allowed to be, quote unquote, socially distant. So we know from the Economic Policy Institute that less than 1 in 5 Black workers and roughly 1 in 6 Hispanic workers are able to work from home. So we already know that there's a disproportionate impacts of deaths, but there's also a disproportionate rate of who's allowed to socially distance. And who are the people on the front lines being the essential workers, really being the backbone of our society in this time. Next slide. So then there's this other narrative that we're seeing about the lives and realities of young people. It's the narrative of the irresponsible young person in the age of the COVID pandemic. And this is really a false narrative, but we have seen it on social media. We've seen it on the news, both young Black folks at house parties or young white folks on the beaches. So we've seen kind of these false narratives go out about about how young folks don't care about COVID. Next slide. We've actually even seen some folks who are usually advocates of young folks saying things like, but quite a few intelligent young people are not taking the virus seriously. And this is why I appreciate Dr. Cohen and having research and hard facts and data, because we actually went out and asked young people this question. And this is where we enter Gen Forward into the conversation. And I'm gonna pass it to Dr. Cohen now.
Thanks, Jonathan, so much. And I'm really happy to be here as an adult ally, adult ally. And we're gonna go through this quickly as we can. We wanna give you some data, but we also always wanna go back to kind of the position of radical change, right? We do wanna think about, what does this moment allow? What does COVID make clear to us in terms of disparities, in terms of precarity, in terms of the type of liberation and the fight that we have to pursue? But very quickly, the data comes from this project called Gen Forward. It's a bi-monthly survey of 18 to 36-year-olds with a focus on African-American, Latinx, and Asian Pacific Islander young people. We know it does not include everyone. We're working hard to expand the sample. But right now we have about 3,000 respondents. And so we feel very comfortable, at least, that the data is rigorous. We wanted to take serious the question of, are young people thinking seriously about this pandemic? And so we went about that by asking a number of different questions. One is just the question that Jonathan asked you: what's the most important issue confronting the country? And as you can see, when the coronavirus pandemic is at the top of the list, overwhelmingly people say the coronavirus pandemic. But I want to make sure that we're paying attention to the other issues that people are naming, and I'm going to come back to that. When we ask, when we kind of randomize coronavirus pandemic, we still see that, you know, the most popular choice, we'll say, across race and ethnicity is still COVID-19, the pandemic, right? So this idea that young people are not taking this seriously, I think is misguided. And in fact, when we ask about how should we deal with the pandemic, right? Majorities of young people, they don't say open up the country. They say impose a national stay-at-home order for as long as it takes. When we ask about the impact both to the economy and to their own personal economy, you can see majorities of African-American, Asian American, and Latinx young people say that the pandemic is a major threat, right, to their economic position. And so we want to be thinking about the precarity that young people had in the past, but also that they continue to live with, in particular because of COVID. Now, there is a way in which we can make the case, yes, this is about seriousness, but I want to say that what we also have to do is layer on how we think about young people's position relative to this pandemic, right? That it's not just about the pandemic, it's also about the lived condition of young people every day, especially young folks of color. And that's also about alienation, as folks just talked about on the last panel. It's about white supremacy and racism. So let's remember, first of all, that young people generally don't, I will say, respect or believe in many of the institutions that are at the center of this response, whether it's the Congress, whether it's political parties, as well as the media, right? And that young folks of color, in particular African Americans, even though they have formal citizenship, don't believe in the fundamentals of this Constitution or this country in terms of many of the political institutions, again, that are at the center of this response, right? That African American young people are more likely to say that they don't feel like a full and equal citizen with all the rights and protections that other people have. They're more likely, young folks of color, to believe that racism remains a major problem in our society, right? There's a framework through which they are experiencing COVID that we can never let people forget. And in fact, if we go back, for example, to February, just a month before the pandemic blows up, when we ask young people what are the most important issues for African Americans, the number one answer is racism. And we've been doing this survey since about 2016. And almost every time we've asked that question for African Americans, the number one issue was racism. And it's the same for the Latinx community. Whenever we ask this question of the most important issue, immigration rises to the top. And sometimes racism is the second, right? So it is important to understand that the narrative around young people has to include the ways in which their lives are structured. Yes, it's about COVID, but it's not only about COVID. And in fact, we can think about the precarities under which they exist. When we ask about financial difficulties with, for example, being able to pay an unexpected bill, we know that African Americans and Latinx young people are much more likely to say that they're worried about those issues, right? When we ask about being able to pay your rent or mortgage, again, we know that African American and Latinx young people are more likely to be worried about those issues. So when we take the alienation that young people feel about political institutions, when we think about the precarity under which they live, when we think about the fact that racism continues to be a kind of overarching way in which their lives are structured, in which their communities have been disinvested, we are not surprised, right, that young folks of color, in particular African Americans, but also Latinx, are less likely to believe that their local government or their state government is doing an excellent or good job in responding to this pandemic, right? They're less likely to trust the information that they're receiving from local governments and from state governments, right? These are the young people who see their parents, who see their friends, who see their community members being sent out the door to work as essential workers, even though we've been told to stay at home, right? So it is this larger context, I think, that we want to be paying attention to. Hello? Oh, when we're thinking about the response. So this is where I want to turn us, because what we really want to focus on is what's possible, right? What does COVID reveal to us that we've been told was not possible, and now we can have, yes, a radical agenda, right? What's possible? What are the radical futures? So what we begin to see is that overwhelmingly young people are saying things like, yes, I support universal basic income, right? Where everybody's getting $1,000. They support the idea that the government is responsible for people whose jobs are displaced by the coronavirus pandemic, right? And we call these the COVID policies. They believe and support the idea that either during the pandemic and possibly beyond the pandemic, again, what's possible, right? That we have to stop localities, right, from evicting tenants, that we have to stop the shut off of water and electricity that people utilize, right? That we have to stop necessarily the demand, in fact, that people have to repay student loans, that we can, in fact, release folks who are considered to be nonviolent criminals or folks who have been incarcerated, right, during the coronavirus pandemic, but again, beyond. And that we can release people, in fact, who are detained by ICE, right? I think one of the ways to think about what's possible through COVID is how do we organize after COVID, right? Or through COVID? What is our agenda and what are the demands we want from the state? And I'll just be very quick here. So I want to remind us, though, that there were radical futures before COVID that young people were in line with, right? That they supported the idea of a universal job guarantee for anyone who wanted to work, that they believed in the wealth tax, and that, in fact, yes, we should tax people who make a hell of a lot more money, right? That they believe that companies that displace workers should, in fact, be taxed for every worker that they displace. These are all like majority supports, right, across race and ethnicity for the most part, that they believed in supporting the Green New Deal and even believed in supporting the Green New Deal, even if it meant raising taxes, that they wanted to eliminate cash bond, right? That they were, again, in support of eliminating jail or prison time for individuals who are thought to have committed nonviolent offenses. That they believed in a relatively progressive immigration policy, right? Creating a path to citizenship, DACA and other such measures. That they supported free tuition, right, at public colleges and universities. And the reason I'm going through all this is that I want us to, in this moment where in fact we are struggling to make sure our people are okay, to remember, in fact, that this is a moment out of which radical futures can be born. This is a moment that is about 2020 election, but it's also about the organizing that has to happen and the possibilities that young people are offering us, right? A possibility like this. So they're as favorable to socialism as they are to capitalism, right? Understanding that maybe neither of these systems really work for folks of color. All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to Jonathan to talk about the possibility of organizing.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Appreciate you so much. And as folks can see pretty clearly, this data is critical for us to understand as we try to dream up these radical futures. Next slide, please. And our final slide, actually. So what we want to understand also is what is happening in the grassroots, what is happening on the ground. So as many of us know, Dr. Cohen brought together 100 radical Black young folks back in 2013, and that launched a movement in an organization called BYP 100 that still exists today. Bless you. That still exists today. So just a couple things to end our presentation. We want folks to understand that there's still work that young Black folks on the ground are doing, even while we're social distancing, even while we're at the front line of being the backbone of this country and being the majority of essential workers still going out into the world, there's still organizing work happening. So with BYP 100 and with the organization that I'm running right now, Liberation House, which comes out of the Black Joy Experience cultural organizing work. Shout out to class for playing the Black Joy Experience before we got on the call. So the first thing that young Black folks in our New York chapter have been working on is making sure we're raising money for our people and redistributing those funds. So we've actually raised more than $400,000 and been able to redistribute those in rapid response funding to Black youth in New York. We've been making sure that, you know, the #1 rule of organizing is making sure that we have relationships with each other and that we're taking care of each other. So our Healing and Safety Council work within BYP 100 has been sending care packages which include masks or cleaning items or other items, just making sure folks know, look, we care about you, we're in relationship with you, we know we can't have our regularly scheduled meetings during these times, but we're still connected. Another thing that we're working on within Liberation House and BYP 100 is Black neologism and cultural organizing. In this time, we need new language, we need new art, we need new frameworks to combat anti-Blackness in these transformative times. So many folks have seen or heard of the Black Joy Experience Freedom Song album. I encourage you, check it out on all platforms, but we'll be releasing another Freedom Song album this year to reflect these COVID times. We really have to understand that Black neologism is a historical practice and process rooted in the Black radical tradition. This is about creating new culturally centered language, expression, chants, and terminology to better understand and navigate the realities of an anti-Black and white supremacist world. So we understand the importance within these spaces of making sure we're creating new, accessible, and culturally centered communication tactics. So that's new words, that's new music, but that's also a counterculture. That's literally a culture that we're trying to create to make sure our folks are staying connected with each other in these times. We also have to focus on conjuring hope in this time. So we launched a Conjuring Hope series. I encourage you all, check out our last program from this weekend on BYP 100's Facebook page. We live streamed the program, but we just know that in this time, our people need hope, and we're gonna conjure it up with art, but also with radically imagining a new world that we wanna live in. And finally, we are going to build systems of liberation in contestation to systems of oppression. So young Black folks who are at the front lines of marginalization aren't waiting for one day for white supremacy to end. We're not waiting for that day. Instead, we're gonna create alternative systems. We're gonna create spaces. We're gonna create subcultures so that we can experience love, joy, and liberation, not sometime in the future, but in these moments of crisis, in these transformative times. So we believe in building systems of liberation, and a lot of this work is taking place in the house and ballroom community, where young people are literally recreating their families in order to thrive and survive in this world. And I'm in the House of Garçon, so happy to chat more offline about folks who are interested in building in the building of these systems of liberation in the house and ballroom community. But that's what we're doing on the ground in BYP 100 and Liberation House. And Gen Forward, the brilliance of Gen Forward is they are liberating this data from the academy, making sure that we actually have facts as organizers on the front line, making sure that we have rigorous data. So I encourage you all, visit genforwardsurvey.com. If you want to partner with us, please reach out to us. We're happy to work with the masses to make sure that we're liberating this data and making sure we're giving access to people who are doing the work on the ground. So thank you. We appreciate you all so much. That is our time as Gen Forward. And just in relationship with BYP 100, I want to introduce actually one of our BYP 100 DC chapter members, Chris, or C. Stees, who is a Washingtonian and recent business technology graduate from the University of the District of Columbia, UDC. Now he's working towards an additional degree in business management at UDC. While working on his studies, he has achieved notoriety as a spoken word poet, with most of his pieces dedicated to inspiring others. Several of his topics center on stimulating change, especially those regarding social economic inequality. We appreciate you all once again, and yeah, Chris, you're up.
Shout out to everyone, previous speakers and the one that's coming after me. My name is Christian Sutton, AKA C. Stees, from Washington, D.C. We're rising senior at UDC. I'm also affiliated with BYP. I'm also affiliated with Serve Your City, D.C., One D.C., and also Eyewitness Palestine. The piece that I created that I came to spit for y'all is entitled Public Enemy 19. And it goes something like this. How do we get here? Like, really, how do we get here? So we have a virus that was established overseas that made its way to the States, ultimately forcing a worldwide shutdown. Clubs, malls, gyms, barbershops, and salons are all on lock. Work and education is shifted remotely. And the government has banned all social activities. So what now? They issue a stay-at-home orders demanding us to stay in from sun up to sundown. But how can we believe anything America says on how to stay safe? When we still have Black and brown men getting gunned down, we're witnessing America show no emotion and unfold its true colors. Quick question. Why is this disease mostly affected the underserved, poor people of color? I wonder what the response would be. The majority of people that contracted the virus identified as white Americans or other. We live in a country that's concerned more about making up for lost profits instead of the rising death toll, massive unemployment rate, and the ones that had hardships before the pandemic occurred but continue to suffer. In the last 2 months, it's been a plethora of misleading information and fake news, biased and incompetent media personalities, misusing a platform, all in the effort just to get views. The more I turn on my TV, the harder it is to watch these so-called leaders act like they know the struggle, but don't even know what it's like to spend a day in our shoes. Like, why does the most apathetic and ingenuine people hold the most power and create all the rules? Hard to put an end to this illness and make strides towards doing what's right if fast food restaurants are still open, filled with frontline workers, still reporting in, jeopardizing their life. Like, seriously. Really ask yourself, is a paycheck really worth more than your life? Yeah, I know. Those earnings will keep food on the table and pay for those bills and those lights. But just keep in mind that each day that you step out, you're not only compromising your well-being, but also your family and others. So either way, you'll be the one that will be paying the price. It's been a decline in handshakes, daps, and hugs, but a rise in fear, firearms, face masks, and gloves. The social distancing and 6 feet hasn't made things better. Instead, it has damaged and broken the bonds with the ones we love, forced my friends into a lifestyle of liquor and drugs. Yeah, I understand that we're in a state of emergency, but I'm just waiting on the day that this will all be over and we can go back to the way things was. So until then, I'm gonna just continue to pray and keep my faith in the man above. They want us to self-quarantine and shelter in place, but they fail to recognize that we come from households and environments that are broken and isn't as safe. Do you know what it's like to get brutally beaten and treated differently just because of your race? Or tell me why have we seen more news out on the deaths and less information out on the people who have healed from the case? The system is corrupted and not designed for us to win, survive, or escape. Their goal is to have us divided, silent, and irate, no matter if it's a new world order or global crisis. Nothing can compare to the day-to-day fight African Americans have to endure and continue to face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that. That was truly amazing. You know, we're not in a full audience, so you can't hear all of us clap for you, but truly, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. That was great. And I believe that was something new that you wrote, correct?
Yes, definitely new. It was, you know what I mean, I had like 4 days, 3 days to write it and memorize it at the same time, so I was able to do it.
Yes, this is a beautiful transition. You know, we had an overview of the adult issues going on for youth and young adults leaders who are in charge of are leading a lot of youth organizations. We heard about the data. We had some spoken word and urgency, and now we're leading into the last section of our discussion here, which is the report out from the young people on the ground. So we are a little bit over and want to make sure we all cover all of them. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce you to the first young adult we have lined up here, all the way from Oklahoma City. I'm gonna say it's the Midwest, okay? We have Ricky Chavez. Ricky is a high school senior. So congratulations on graduating, Ricky. Not what you expected, but we support and congratulate you for that. He serves as the program director for Dream Action Oklahoma, who is a sister organization for United We Dream. And he is passionate for immigrants' rights because it stems from his personal experience in growing up in a mixed status family. Currently, he is working with Dream Action Oklahoma as the census campaign manager. So just another reminder to fill out that census. So I'm gonna hand it over to Ricky to give us a report out of what young people are experiencing on the ground in their personal experience. Go ahead, Ricky.
Hi, hello everyone. As mentioned, my name is Ricardo Chavez. I'm 18 years old and I use any and all pronouns. I'm a recent high school graduate and a community organizer from Oklahoma City. I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the programs director for Dream Action Oklahoma, an immigrant rights youth-led nonprofit right here in Oklahoma. I am the son of Maria and Ricardo Chavez, both of who immigrated to the United States in the 1990s. I come from a mixed status family, and so I grew up experiencing the complexities of having undocumented family members while being a US citizen myself. Because of this, I struggled a lot in finding my place in my community. I'm also a queer youth, and so it was really hard for me to find a place, but when I found Dream Action Oklahoma, I found a place where I could be myself and all of my identities. I could be queer, I could be the son of immigrants, but I could also be a young person. I had found difficulties in finding a place where my voice as a young person would be heard. But at Dream Action Oklahoma, I immediately got to be a part of the team. They became like a family for me. And I didn't just become a number or a statistic for the organization, but I became a decision maker. I got to be on the front lines of the work that was being done to impact our community. And I got to make the decisions that I needed for myself and for my family. But in doing this, I think I got to experience organizing a little bit differently. Oklahoma is often left out of a lot of national conversations. And so it's kind of forced organizers here in Oklahoma to have to rely on each other and our community to really build momentum. Because Oklahoma is so traditionally conservative and red identifying, oftentimes it's forgotten that our community is here, right? Like immigrants are still in Oklahoma, and we see them every day. They're part of our family, they're part of our communities, but oftentimes on a national conversation, there's this idea that the immigrant community doesn't exist in Oklahoma. And so through the pandemic, we realized that a lot of our community was left out once again. They weren't part of stimulus packages, they weren't part of the relief. All of our young students were left as first generation students, a lot of them, having to continue while still being essential to the functioning of our households. With a lot of our parents being immigrants, we have to be the ones to help them translate documents, take them to doctor's appointments, and just be a part of the functioning of our house. But we had to take on this while also taking on continuing our education, and knowing that our parents were the frontline workers that were risking themselves every day by going out to work just to provide for our families. And so Dream Action Oklahoma realized that once again, immigrant families were left out. And so we took action on our own. We were able to work with our community partners and with local organizations to make sure that we could provide some sort of help for our community. We partnered with local grocery stores and we started creating packages that we could give to our community members. We started seeking out different ways to be able to support them right there in the moment and not wait around for our representatives to decide when it was appropriate to help our community. And so in this, we've been able to find power within ourselves. We've been able to call our community and create space for our community to let us know what it is that they need and make sure that we give it to them. And so I think my biggest thing here is just that there's power in people and in numbers, and there's power in being united. And that is what I've learned being on the ground in Oklahoma, is that I can't wait for our representatives to decide that I'm worthy enough, but I have to take a stand and I have to show my community and my people that I'm ready to take action and unite with them. So with that, I want to pass it off to Erin, who is a youth advocate that's dedicated to bringing awareness and empowerment to vulnerable communities of color so that they can be equipped with the tools necessary for generational curses and create new systems that are sustainable and impactful in the long term.
Cool. Thank you so much, Ricky, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really impactful, and I'm just happy to be a part of this. What I want to be able to share with you guys are some of the solutions that our organization has been currently working on, because I'm pretty sure for everybody, everything is completely changed and everything's moved online. And just a little background, I'm a part of the Sacramento Youth Alliance, and what we really focus on is hard work. We really focus not on the hard work, but the hard work and being able to work with youth. And we always do this within a very intimate setting. We do this together within like a couple of hours that we have with each other. But since the pandemic has happened, we've been trying to replicate those intimate settings online. Because at the very core of our work that we do, it's always been like mental health. That's been a very core part of our advocacy. And I actually wish that there was a little bit more of that like on the poll as well. But like one of the first programs that was really able to come out of this was by bringing together our Voices of Change. And so our Virtual Voices of Change is an online committee where we have young artists all come together, where they're able to express what's going on with their mental health. Because as most of us know, communities of color, mental health is very much stigmatized and is not talked about as much. We don't have like access to these resources, and because of that, we're not in the right headspace to want to be civically engaged. And that's why we were able to put this together so that we could be able to have youth be able to come together and express exactly like what has been going on with them. And we were very intentional about not making it a competition. We really wanted it to be a space so that anybody could be able to join, because due to the pandemic, there isn't enough spaces for youth to be able to come together, to be able to talk about everything that is going on. And we also do understand that not everybody is an artist. And so another thing that we've done, which has been very successful for us, is our online street talks. We have them every single Friday, where we come up with a topic that is addressing young people, whether it's talking about like ACT and SAT scores and how they're a big barrier in preventing students from like achieving a higher education, or the youth being politically burnt out, or just how the pandemic has affected their quality of education overall. And it's really amazing to be able to see our young people come together in these rooms, because as we're putting this town hall together, we're trying to come up with different solutions for the youth. But a lot of the times we do kind of forget to ask them. And we're very intentional about doing that with all of our work, is asking them, what do they need? Like, what support do they need? Instead of us just assuming that we already know. And by doing that, that's how we were able to realize, like, you know what? We believe that there should be more mental health services in school. We shouldn't just have it as like, as academic counselors, we should be able to have mental health services provided at the very youngest age. And like, we were able to come up with that solution through the conversations that we were able to engage with the youth on there. There's not enough space or time or opportunities given to youth to be able to contribute to these conversations, and to be able to contribute solutions to the problems that we don't even know, like as adults. And so we really hope that like through like these solutions that you guys will be able to also replicate like some of this, of being able to just create more online communities for youth to be able to come together so that they can talk about like what's going on, so that they're not continuing to bottle it up and burn them from the inside out. But that's about all that I have for you guys today. I'm now gonna pass it on to Mira Marcus Garcia. She is a young Native American woman who is from the reservation of Oke-Owenge Pueblo, located in New Mexico, who became a young mother at the age of 19 and was blessed with a baby boy that they love. They're everything to her, and she wants to ensure a good future for him. And she also serves on the Young Parent Advocate Council. So without further ado, I'll give it up to Mira.
Hi everyone. My name is Mira. I currently work as a young parent advocate. I'm serving on a youth parent council that is advising and creating the foundation structure for a national program that helps young parents and advocates for them to find resources, to find everything that they need as a parent, possibly classes, and we're just going to be handing out resources and changing policies to make it easier for parents. I'm from Okeowinge Pueblo, which is one of the 19 tribes in New Mexico. So the way my community has been affected is that our traditional doings haven't been going on a lot recently, and we usually have one or two within the time of Easter and Mother's Day. We didn't have them this year, and we're currently waiting to see if we're still going to be doing our actual feast days, which are in June. So our traditional celebrations, which is a big impact on me and my family because we participate a lot. Other ways that it has impacted me and my family is our family traditions, like getting together every week for breakfast or a brunch doesn't happen. We had one this past Sunday, but just because everyone's been on quarantine for so long and needed some family interaction, that mental break is often very helpful, especially when you have little ones and you're stuck at home with them and you need the support of your family. I am a single mother, and I have been working since probably November, and my son was born a year and 4 months before I started working again. So I had just started getting back into work and getting back into the routine of feeling like a normal human being that gets things done, and was met with keeping my family safe from COVID-19 because I have a grandmother who is 95 years old, and so we have to keep things tight and respectful around her all the time. So in order to protect my family, I decided to stop working, and so I haven't been working since March, the last week of March. And it's been stressful being at home with an almost 2-year-old running around, but I'm coping with cooking, spring cleaning, and just reaching out to my family to make sure everyone is okay. And my family is one of my biggest resources. So with that, I'm going to introduce Christian Powell, who is from Wichita, Kansas. She started advocacy work when she was 18, and she is working with youth who have been incarcerated or entered different systems of care. Her passions come from personal experiences that come from her heart and love for youth who have diverse experiences. She's currently working as a member of Emerging Leaders Committee with for Juvenile Justice, and she plans to continue her work as a youth advocate for young people who have been vulnerable to systems.
Thank you, Myra. My name is Kristen Powell. I'm calling in from Wichita, Kansas. I serve on the Emerging Leaders Committee with the Coalition of Juvenile Justice. When I was asked to be a part of this, I was really just racking my brain, like, what am I supposed to talk about? And it was like, I had to come up with this whole outline and everything. But then I thought, to do it easier, I'm just gonna do what specifically speaks to my heart when it comes to the issues of juvenile justice. So obviously there's the bigger issues of the cluster sites, and if the youth were to have COVID-19 while being incarcerated, they're more at risk because it's easier for them to catch COVID-19 because they're all in little spots in like cells and little dorms or wherever they may be housed, however they are housed. So the first thing that really spoke to my heart is them not having court dates. I think that's a really hard one because when you're incarcerated as a youth, that's your one bit of hope. Like, I have court coming up and I might get out of here, no matter what it's for. I mean, people are in there for the lowest level crime, not even crimes like status offenses such as running away or skipping school, truancy, whatever it may be, and they're just housed in these juvenile facilities. And if they don't have any court dates coming up because they're all canceled because of COVID-19, then that can be really stressful, knowing that you're stuck in jail with people with high level charges just because you ran away or just because you skipped school. So I feel like that really spoke to my heart, just people just sitting there waiting and not knowing what's going on at such a young age. I mean, in Kansas, the youngest you can be incarcerated is 10 years old. So there could be 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, all the way up to 17 being all in the same dorms incarcerated with the lowest level of crime. So that was like really big for me. Another thing that spoke to my heart when thinking about juvenile justice was the youth that are transferring from the juvenile jails to the adult jails. I remember when I was younger, everybody joked and called the juvenile detention daycare, because really it kind of is like a daycare. I mean, you get snacks, you get to eat good food, you get to play games, watch TV, whatever. That's how it is in Kansas. But once you transition from that jail to the adult facility, it's like a whole different change. I feel like that can cause so much emotional trauma, especially if they're in there for a low level crime. It's just really hard. And I feel like just transitioning from this type of jail to like a big adult jail with people that are in there for serious charges and they're adults, and you're just like just turned 18, your 18th birthday or 17th, whatever age you come of age in your state, that can be a lot on you. Another thing is when you turn 18 in the state of Kansas and you're incarcerated, you can lose a lot of your benefits. So for example, you could lose your college benefits or your independent living benefits, or you could get like little to no benefits just because of the simple fact that you were in jail on your 18th birthday. So that really speaks to me, because if youth are only incarcerated due to COVID-19 and not having court dates, are they losing their college benefits or are they losing their independent living benefits? Those are like very big problems, and you can't get those back because that's how the Department of Children and Family has their policies. So once you're incarcerated on your 18th birthday, that's the only thing they take into consideration. Another thing that I was thinking about is program disruption. So a lot of times in the juvenile detention facilities, they have things like chaplain visits where they can visit with chaplains or just mentors that can come and like speak light to their situation. They have volunteer ran groups like Bible studies every week. They have reward type of events where if you're on a certain level, you can go to like programming where you would get snacks or be able to play games and stuff like that. And all of that is volunteer ran. So I'm just wondering, like, how are these youth, like, what are the alternatives for these programs if the volunteers aren't allowed to enter into the facility? Are they getting the same type of rewards, or are they just going to be sitting down watching boring educational videos and not having any supplement for what they were getting before? And the last thing that I was thinking about is programs. So youth that are in programs or group homes or out-of-home placements. What is their progress like? Is it disrupted because of COVID? Is it decreased? Are they not getting support right now? Are they able to go home? Are the meetings being had that are allowing them to go home? Is everything canceled? Like, I don't know what that looks like. I know a lot of people are still in the group homes. They're still incarcerated. Kansas has not done a lot to release youth. I feel like that's like a state level ask, is to release all the youth from the detention. And I feel like that's not really something that's going to happen. So I just want to think about what are the alternatives and what are we actually doing? If we're not going to release them, what can we do? And I think that's really the like top 5 things that have been on my mind when it comes to juvenile justice. So with that, I'll introduce Chi King Lee. I'm sorry, I know I messed up your name. He graduated from the University of St. Thomas with his bachelor's in science in mechanical engineering, and he is from Oakdale, Minnesota.
Cool. Thanks, Kristen. You said my name good, King Lee. So, yeah. I just want to share my experience of how COVID has affected me and my community. So, the main thing is that I'm currently unemployed. I was working in the food service industry. So, the funny thing was that our grand opening day for the new restaurant was also our closing day, because that's when our governor announced the the ban for Minnesota. But that was an interesting experience. But yeah, with the unemployment process, I was lucky that my restaurant, they helped us a lot with the unemployment process if we had any questions. But I know that a lot of my friends and their friends don't know the process and they never done it. And so even if there is resources out there for them, they aren't aware of it or don't know how to get to it. So they ask me about how I done it. And so one thing that I think we should work on too is showing young adults how to get those resources, because it's really confusing for the first time, maybe being unemployed and with everything going on. That's very important, and it's a process that is tedious, and the website is not always the best format. So yeah, and then for the Hmong community too, because I am Hmong here in Minnesota, there's a lot of rumors or things going around, and with our parents being really superstitious, it's pretty hard educating them. So as young adults, we do have to educate the elders, and that's something that, especially at Facebook or just media and radio, things can get really skewed up. So one thing that I have to do is educate my parents and my grandparents, and that's something that us young adults have to deal with. And so I think that educating ourselves and finding resources for ourselves and for our parents is something that we have to work on. And then one thing that also affected me as an unemployed a young adult is that finding jobs out there is a little bit harder now too. Just because I know a few positions that I applied for, they're now put on hold just because of COVID. And a few of my friends who are just graduating college or continuing their second year or third year, trying to find internship has been a lot harder for them. I know one of them has 1 or 2 internships lined up, but they're now canceled. And being a student in college, having internship is really important. And for them, having those taken away just because of COVID could be pretty stressful for them and for their experience, especially finding jobs isn't always the easiest thing. So having that experience taken away is pretty hard. And then one thing that I do too is I help manage a political campaign, and a grassroots thing that we do is door knocking. So with COVID going around, that's something that we can't really do, go knock on people's door and tell them to go vote or educate them a little bit. And so that's something that me as a co-campaign manager and part of political campaign, we have to deal with and find different alternatives. But yeah, those are my main things that have affected me and my community, is the loss of jobs and finding those resources, and finding those who can provide those resources. I know I try to provide them when I can, but I'm only one individual. So having resources out there more readily available to young adults is something we should work on. And also educating people about COVID too, especially your parents or grandparents who listen to the radio, especially for us having the Hmong radio. Like one thing is drink a lot of hot water with lemongrass and you'll be okay. Something like that is not gonna protect you from COVID necessarily. So I think educating the older community is really important too, because they are more at risk too compared to us younger adults. So also thanks for having me on here, and I'm gonna pass it back to Marlon.
Thank you so much, Chi King. And let me just go through their names really quickly of all the young adults on the ground calling in from all different states to give us their perspective of what's happening on the ground. So as I say their names, let's just give them some encouragement here in the chat. So thank you again to Ricky Chavez, all the way from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Thank you. Thank you to Aaron Armour from Sacramento, California. Thank you so much. Thank you to Mira Marquez Garcia from New Mexico. Thank you to Kristen Powell, who's all the way from Kansas, and for all those very detailed 5 things specifically on juvenile justice. I have learned a lot. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, last but not least, thank you so much for Chi King Lee for your experience in Minnesota. Shout out to Chi King because he was able to get on this quickly when we needed him to step up to join us for this. So we truly appreciate you for joining us on such short notice. So with that, we have discussed a lot of things, right? We went over overview of adult issues, data, and we added we humanize that data by hearing about some of the young people on the ground and how they're experiencing and their personal experience. So what is the next step, right? We had a discussion, but we want to make sure that you walk away from this discussion with something for you to feel that you can go ahead and bring back to your community and work on these issues, because again, they matter. And these are things that are concrete and you can do now. So I hope you can see this PowerPoint slide here on the 5 call to action resources that we're asking all the folks who are joining us for this conversation to do. The first one is to join the Reconnecting Youth campaign. It's a national campaign that focuses on getting more money and appropriate funding to a lot of jobs and employment pathways for opportunity youth who are not in school, not working, between the ages of 16 and 24. We do amazing work. And it's, again, we have a sign-on letter, so please get involved. Please look at the chats. We're putting up the links there. It's an amazing organization with a lot of co-partners who are doing amazing work for this population, and we have won in regards to trying to secure an increase in appropriation funding, so please check us out. Number 2, contact your state, local elected officials and hold them accountable and ask them about the stimulus relief bills and state guidance for your state around COVID-19. We are super excited. Us and other co-partners have put together a youth leaders guide on COVID-19 responses and recovery bills that we can share. You will also be able to find in our landing page after this. But really what it does, it's a very short brief that gives you a main overview of things that I couldn't go in detail earlier when I was talking about key points on the COVID relief packages, right? So it tells you how much money was put into all of these other programs, what is missing. It also walks you through things that you can do. It's very to the point, meant for youth leaders to be able to read that and use that as a resource. So please check that out. Hot off the press, it's shout out to Rashawn with NYEC who led that for us. Great brief, please check that out. The third call to action is to fill out the census. We mentioned this a couple of times throughout the call. That is your money. It is free money. You have to claim it. So please, I know that especially for the Latinx community, I know I had to like really try to force some of my family members to fill it out because they were afraid about, are they going to be able to track if I fill this out? And so, no, please fill out the census. Specifically with NAACP, they have a campaign called #BeCounted. It's quick and it's easy, takes, I'm telling you, it's just a couple of minutes, so please fill out the census and make sure that you get your community's money. The third thing, register to vote and bring your voice to the ballot box, especially right now, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening. We should have the leverage and say in what it is that we demand our future to look like, right? So we have to bring our voices to the ballot box and show folks, especially now more than ever, if you're tired, if you're frustrated with things that are not being done the way that they should be, let's bring that voice to the ballot box. So please make sure to register to vote with Rock the Vote. There's a link here to be able to do that. Shout out to Rock the Vote, our partners are doing great things. Another thing that they're doing is a webinar series on a lot of these conversations or topics around, for example, bills. That was last week. They will be having other ones around specifically for young people in regards to being able to get those kind of information or resources that Chi King Ling was talking about. So check them out, check out Rock the Vote, great information there. The fifth thing that we have here is make sure to add your support of decarceration. Like Kristen talked us through a lot of the things that she was talking about in the state of Kansas. We are demanding a just and humane response to the outbreak. And there's a sign-on called Humanity Not Cages platform led by Colors of Change. Please check them out. Another thing that you can do right now to help support and continue this movement of all the great things that you have heard so far. And then one more thing that is not on this slide, but we know that it's important to bring up, is that this week also marks the 8th annual National Week of Action Against Incarcerated Youth. It's an event led by Save the Kids. You can find out more information and support their actions in your state and your community. We will be uploading that link as well on the chat. So here are some, really there's 6 call to action resources, things that you can do right now. So if you've been putting off registering to vote, if you've been putting off the census, if you've been putting off, maybe you feel like you're too down and you don't have the energy to try to maybe jump into some of these initiatives, feel hope, feel inspired by everything that you've heard today, and try and join us. This is meant to be a conversation that's going to be continued after this town hall discussion, and we will be launching a Facebook group and inviting all of you, so stay tuned for that. But really, if you heard anyone that really sparked you, gave you hope, gave you that, added, action or initiated you, please reach out to us. We are happy to connect folks. Please let's stay in touch. My information is the first one there, followed by Jamira Burley, who fabulously facilitated the panel with the rest of our young adult leaders, as well as Keisha Bird, the Director of Youth Policy at CLASP, who has been a great person to help us really put this together as well. Shout out to Jamira, who's also on our CLASP board. She's a board member and is doing great work. So if you want to hear more about either CLASP or our co-partners' work on regards to youth employment, workforce, all the issues that we talked about, mental health, opportunity youth, youth of color, please reach out to us. We want to be a resource for y'all, right? We can't do much. We only have the information with ourselves in our own circles. We want to be able to make sure this information trickles down all the way to the community level. So please, thank you all for joining us. We are actually 5 minutes early, but I'm not going to keep you all. So thank you again. I hope you have a good rest of your evening, and I hope you were inspired today. Thanks again, everyone.